The war that divided the Imperium and set the galaxy aflame had come to its final phase, as the fleet that sundered the unity of humanity concentrated in a single star system. The full might of the traitors had arrived upon the solar system of Terra. How fast could the Warmaster dismantle the Loyalist defense? Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 14th video, we will explore the prelude to the Siege of Terra, the Solar War, where the traitors advanced from Pluto all the way to the cradle of humanity itself. For years, the Loyalists had been preparing the defences of the solar system. Rogal Dorn knew that an assault on the solar system was inevitable. In order to transport thousands of ships, the traitors had been forced to use stable exits of the Immaterium. The solar system had two, one near Pluto and one near Uranus. Unfortunately, not all of the traitors would come from outside, for the Dark Mechanicum controlled the red planet of Mars. To deal with all these possible angles of attack, the Loyalists set up 5 defense spheres. The first 2 spheres defended the warp exits, while the third was stationed near Jupiter. The fourth was a blockade of Mars. The fifth was near Terra. Moreover, the White Scar fleet was deployed on the edges of the solar system to prevent any surprise attacks. The last piece of the defense was the protective aura of the Emperor, which blocked the entry of all demons into the solar system. After the Loyalist defeat at the Garmin cluster, the traitors' fleet had grown to a size so immense that even the substantial defense platforms had no chance of destroying it. Consequently, Dorn's doctrine was to inflict as much damage as possible upon the aggressors before they punched through his static defenses. When the battle would transform into pure fleet combat, the Loyalists were to retreat. Through these tactics, Dorn hoped to preserve a significant portion of the fleet, so that when other Loyalists would reach the solar system, the navies would link up to meet the Warmaster in decisive combat. Incoming towards Terra was the largest army the Imperium had ever seen. This massive host included the full might of the Space Marines, consisting of 6 legions with their Primarchs, part of the scattered Night Lords under Gendor Scrivok, word-bearer followers of Zardu Layak, and Alpha Legion volunteers under 1st Captain Ingo Petch. The majority of the traitors' current forces were mobilized over the past few years, comprising recruits with no experience, and garrisons from all over the galaxy. Their numbers were overwhelming, reaching several billion, yet they would serve as little more than cannon fodder. The traitor fleet boasted tens of thousands of ships, yet most of them had not been made with combat in mind. Vessels made for exploration, trading, or peacekeeping had been repurposed to screen the few thousand combat machines. The Solar War started on the 1st of Primus, or January of 014 M31. The first traitors, under the command of Horus Aximand, exited the warp near Pluto. The first 100 ships through the portal exited directly into a minefield. Their loss barely put a dent in the 3,000-ship-strong traitor fleet. Facing this advanced force was a Loyalist fleet under the command of Sigismund, which possessed fewer than 1,000 ships and 4 of Pluto's moons. While the battle for Pluto continued, the traitors exited the warp near Uranus. First, they unleashed the Scrap Code, which barely had any effect, as new and safer communication protocols were put into place. Next came the never-ending stream of ships that Perturabo commanded. If the Loyalists could destroy the incoming vessels faster than new ones were arriving, the sphere could be held. Unfortunately, those dreams were crushed when Perturabo brought a Space Hulk, a monstrous amalgamation of destroyed ships, asteroids, and space stations. The moon-sized construction had been refitted with weapons and void shields, giving the traitors a staging ground to start pushing back the Loyalist forces. In the meantime, Magnus the Red conducted a ritual that sacrificed millions of lives, opening the 3rd stable warp exit above the planetary plane. Through that exit, 12,000 ships were translated. The Armada split into 3 parts. The full might of the Dark Mechanicum, numbering 7,000 ships, set course to break the blockade of Mars, while Abaddon and Zardu Layak took 5,000 ships to attack Terra directly. The last fleet, under the command of Thousand Sons Captain Azek Ariman, numbered only 30 ships, and covertly set course towards a comet close to the Sun. Under the command of Jabal Khan, the White Scars intercepted Abaddon's fleet. However, with less than 150 ships, all they could do was harass. The Sons of Horus did not respond to the White Scar provocations. Their goal was to reach Terra as fast as possible. Entangling the fleet in the open against the faster White Scars would be ineffective. Instead, Abaddon carved a new unit out of the fastest smuggler ships in the fleet to keep the Loyalists occupied. Jabal Khan outmaneuvered Abaddon's distraction and continued to bleed the traitors. After 3 days of combat, the traitors achieved the first breakthrough. Boarding teams captured Pluto's moon Nyx, turning it against the defenders. With 2/3 of his fleet still intact, Sigismund signalled the retreat. Yet, as the traitors were taking over the moon of Kerberos, it was blown up with the millions of tons of explosives which had been placed inside it. The blast took the traitors by surprise. 205 ships were lost, throwing the armada into complete disarray. Sigismund turned back, seizing upon the opportunity to attempt to kill Horus Aximand. The counterattack was initially successful, but the situation became worse for Sigismund with each passing second. Aximand reformed his fleet and aggressively counterattacked. Eventually, Sigismund's ship was boarded. The two leaders were within striking distance, but after engaging in a duel, there would be no way back. Sigismund decided against engaging, falling back first from his ship, then from Pluto. In his second retreat, there were fewer than 100 ships with him. After the moon-blowing gambit, Perturabo became wary, slowing down his assault on the second sphere considerably. 2 more days passed until it was finally broken. From Uranus, loyalists managed to save 300 ships and retreat towards Jupiter. After days of no reaction from Abaddon, Jabal Khan became desperate to slow him down. His attacks came closer and closer, trying to force a reaction from the traitor fleet. In one such provocation, the White Scars entered teleportation range for a short moment. Abaddon did not let this opportunity slip by, personally leading an immediate teleported assault right into a trap. Jabal's ambush worked. If he could not stop the traitors, he would at least kill their commander. The Sons of Horus were fallen upon and slaughtered. As the 2 champions of the Space Marines engaged in a duel, Abaddon pulled out his trump card. A strike team detonated the engines of his ship, which disabled artificial gravity. Thrown off and robbed of his agility, Jubal tried desperately to continue the attack, only to be impaled by Abaddon. After losing their champion, the White Scars fired on Abaddon. Zardulayak stepped in, using sorcery to shield Abaddon from certain death. The fire was then turned back on the Loyalists, eliminating the rest of the White Scars. The initial Loyalist defences had been broken, and the traitors were now free to enter the solar system. The local population had been taken over by fear. The civilianry on Neptune rebelled. Chaos cults sprung out, their numbers growing rapidly, due to the citizens feeling abandoned by the Emperor. Neptune fell before the traitors arrived there. Away from the front, millions more civilians sought to escape to safety. In ships so small they weren't confiscated for defense, thousands tried to reach safety. The traitors noticed these overcrowded vessels. Those ships that were heading towards space habitats had their food infected. Once the ships arrived at their destination, the infection spread to all local supplies. The people there had a choice to make, either to starve to death or die from food poisoning. In just a few days, all of them would perish. Some clinged to the false hope of aid that never came. Others vented toxic gas to end the suffering early. Other ships headed towards Saturn. Due to Night Lord's interference, they were mistakenly identified as carrying traitor troops. The Saturnine army shot down their own refugees, despite the desperate pleas for help coming from them. The widespread atrocities committed against civilians across the solar system were aimed to break the spirit of the defenders. The Space Marines would fight either way, but normal soldiers could be compelled to break or change sides. Additionally, every death was an offering to the Chaos Gods, who gnawed on the Emperor's protective shield. For now it held, but the Emperor's power was not limitless. The traitors had firmly established their presence in the solar system and pressed onward toward Terra. The main attack came on Jupiter, as it was the only attack angle that could be steadily supplied through the warp exits. The defenders started firing long before the traitors came into range. The barrage could be easily avoided, but for the cost of slowing down. For Perturabo, speed was of the essence, for there was a strict timetable to fulfill, and every delay could lead to a catastrophe. The traitors suffered losses to reach Jupiter as fast as possible. As the battle for Jupiter unfolded, the twin attack on Terra and Mars started. Near the Red Planet, the Dark Mechanicum unleashed experimental and forbidden weaponry. Among the many examples were energy beams that forced the targeted engine to overload and explode, and extremely long-range artillery that siphoned void shields to redirect itself to attack another ship. After the first defending vessel was destroyed, the surface of Mars was lit up with hundreds of rockets aimed at the Loyalists. The fourth sphere was attacked from the surface and space at the same time. Drawing closer to Terra, Abaddon's armada approached at full speed. The fleet was not strong enough to win this battle, especially since their presence was reported in advance by the White Scars. Instead, their goal was Luna. Even taking that objective bordered on impossibility, as the ancient ring of space platforms around the moon was bolstered by several fleets, and Dawn's flagship, the Phalanx. Torpedoes were launched, yet Abaddon did not slow down. His approach was radical, for his fleet did not form a combat formation, but formed a spearhead aimed at Luna. Suffering heavy losses, they crept towards the moon. At the last moment, the fleet peeled back, save for one ship. Abaddon, after accelerating his ship through the entire solar system, rammed the moon. In a split second before the total annihilation of the ship, the best sons of Horus teleported deep into Luna's fortress to take over genetic facilities that were used to create the Space Marines. Moments before the ramming of Luna, Ahriman and his covert armada took over a comet between Venus and Terra. Their goal was to conduct a ritual that Lorgar had prepared before his banishment. The timing had to be precise, for it required all planets to be in a line. The entire solar war had been orchestrated for that ritual. Blood was spilled on every planet, and planets were moved into desired places. The ramming of Luna and sacrifice of several Psykers served as a catalyst to the ritual. The tail of the comet widened, eclipsing the sun and turning the skies black. Everyone, from child to Primarch, felt unease in their soul. The protective aura of the Emperor was crushed, reducing its range to just terror. Thereafter, the tail of the comet opened like an eye. Through it, another fleet translated, one led by Horus, Fulgrim and Angron. Accompanying the fleet were hordes of bloodthirsty demons. The demonic force, led by Samus, had targeted the Phalanx. On it was a survivor of Isstvan III, who had been under Samus's influence for years. Manifesting from her, the demon hordes slaughtered the crew. Samus attacked Rogel Dawn. The Primarch won, only to witness the demon possess another human on the ship. While Dawn was repeatedly killing Samus, other demons ravaged the crew. This slaughter was halted after the Isstvan survivor committed suicide. Unfortunately, it was too late. The Phalanx had lost hundreds of thousands of crew, and was forced to retreat from battle. Dawn left his flagship and descended to Terra, together with Sigismund. The fleet of Horus crashed into the defences of Terra. The battle was fierce, and lasted several days. Of the three battlefields, Mars was cracked first, but the remnants of its fleet bolstered the Throne World's armada. The Dark Mechanicum celebrated the liberation of their homeworld. Next fell Jupiter. Survivors were too far from Terra, and had no chance of reaching it before the battle in space would be decided. Instead, they joined Phalanx and the White Scars on Saturn, where they awaited for reinforcements from outside the solar system. Terra held. For days, thousands of traitor ships crashed headlong on the last sphere of defense. First, Luna was silenced. Its ancient batteries were brought down, first by Abaddon's ramming, then prolonged bombardment. Through stations, platforms and fleets, the traitors mercilessly advanced. Days became weeks. Terra's orbit was reached, yet no attack on the surface was made while even a single loyalist was alive in space. Eventually, on the 13th of Secundus, the solar war ended. The solar system was now in the traitors' hands. Over 44 days of constant battle, the defences that took years to build were annihilated. Horus's army, although battered, had the forges of Mars ready to resupply them. The siege of Terra was about to start. Arriving fashionably late was the Death Guard with Mortarion. How will the situation develop? What steps will the Siegemaster Perturabo take to conquer humanity's last stand? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.